What information must the general IND include? FDA Form 1571. FDA Form 1571 cover sheet, table of contents, investigative plan, investigators brochure, protocol, chemistry, manufacturing information, pharmacology, toxicology, previous human research literature information, additional information. How many days after FDA receives IND submission does the IND go into effect? An IND goes into effect 30 days after the FDA receives the submission unless the FDA notifies the sponsor of a clinical hold. When must an IND amendment be submitted? What are TA requirements for expanded access? How many days does a physician or sponsor have to submit written summary of expanded access to the FDA after use? 15 days. 21 CFR Part 312.34. Treatment use of an investigational new drug. During which phases is a treatment protocol usually made available? During Phase 3, but if data is compelling, may be available during Phase 2 or after all clinical trials have been completed and sponsor of trials is awaiting pursuing marketing approval. How long is the waiting period before a treatment IND study can be initiated? 30 days. When will the FDA permit use of an investigational drug in widespread use? If the criteria for expanded access are met, if drug is being investigated in a controlled clinical trial under IND designed to support a marketing application for the expanded use, or all clinical trials are completed. What are the steps for withdrawing an IND? Which form is used to certify absence of financial interest? FDA Form 3454. What form is used for the mandatory reporting of serious adverse events? FDA Form 3500A. What is 21 CFR Part 50 Subpart D? Additional safeguards for children in clinical investigations. What is the FDA Form 482? Notice of inspection. What is 21 CFR Part 50.20 Subpart B? General requirements for informed consent. What steps must be taken if IND is put on clinical hold? Proposed study subjects may not be given the investigational drug. Ongoing study, no recruiting of new subjects, and subjects receiving investigational drug must discontinue therapy unless specifically permitted by FDA in the interest of patient safety. What are the reasons for clinical hold? Exposure of unreasonable significant risk injury to subjects, unqualified investigators. Investigator brochure is misleading, erroneous, or incomplete and does not contain sufficient information to assess risk to subjects of proposed studies. Phase 1 clinical trials. Usually 20 to 80 subjects meant to assess initial safety and efficacy, usually single-center sites. Phase 2 clinical trials. Usually no more than several hundred subjects, multi-centered sites. Phase 3 clinical trials. Confirmation of short-term efficacy and established long-term efficacy, establish benefit-risk relationship, provide adequate basis for labeling several hundred to several thousand subjects. Phase 4 clinical trials. Post-marketing, continue assessing overall therapeutic value. Size depends on design. When was the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act established and why? 1938, to establish the FDA's jurisdiction over cosmetic and medical devices in the U.S. What year did they amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act specifically for medical devices? 1976. 21 CFR Part 812, Investigational Device Exemption. 21 CFR Part 814, Pre-Market Approval of Medical Devices. Medical device. Device is not dependent on chemical action or being metabolized and also must be recognized in official national formulary or U.S. pharmacopoeia, intended for use in the diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, or prevention of disease in man or other animals. What are the clinical development stages for devices? 1. Pilot Study. 2. Pivotal Study. 3. Post-market studies compared to drugs and biologics, which typically have 1,000s of subjects. Device studies usually have 100s of subjects. Class I. Lowest risk. General controls are sufficient to provide a reasonable assurance of the safety and effectiveness. X-powered wheelchairs, infusion pumps, and surgical drapes. Class II. Moderate risk usually requires a 510K. General controls are insufficient to assure safety and effectiveness. Special controls include special labeling requirements, mandatory performance standards, post-market surveillance. X-powered wheelchairs, infusion pumps, and surgical drapes. Class III. Highest risk usually requires a 510K. Usually those that support or sustain human life, important for preventing impairment of human health, present a potential risk of illness or injury. X implant used in supporting or sustaining human life. Pre-market approval. Required process of scientific review to ensure reasonable safety and effectiveness of device must be FDA approved or not cleared before marketing per 21 CFR Part 814. Pilot studies. Exploratory includes small numbers of subjects. Pivotal studies. Determine safety and effectiveness, include most of overall subject numbers. Post-market studies. Design improvement, expansion of safety and effectiveness, data development of new uses. What are the abbreviated requirements for device studies? Abbreviated requirements. Label device. Ensure investigators maintain records and make reports. Obtain IRB approval. Significant risk versus non-significant risk. Informed consent. Monitoring of studies. Refrain from promotion. Exemption for investigation of a device. Abbreviated requirements. Who designates a device study as significant risk or non-significant risk? The sponsor makes the initial determination of SR or NSR, and then the IRB evaluates the study. Sometimes the IRB may defer to the FDA to make the initial determination. Minimal risk. The likelihood of harm is no greater than that encountered in daily life or during routine PE. IDE. Unapproved IDE permits device to be shipped lawfully. 21 CFR Part 312 versus 21 CFR Part 812. 21 CFR Part 312 equals FDA Form 1572. Serious adverse event. 21 CFR Part 812 equals investigational agreement. Unanticipated adverse device effects. How many days do you have to report a deviation from an investigational device plan to sponsor and IRB, and why? 5 days. Deviations are to protect human life or physical well-being. How many days do you have to report an unanticipated adverse device effect? As soon as possible, but no later than 10 days after investigator first learns of the event. What must a sponsor do if they determine that the investigational product presents significant and unreasonable risk to subjects? 1. Immediately discontinue all studies that present risk. 2. Report FDA and IRB. 3. Assure return and accounting for all investigational products devices. Sponsor responsibilities. What must the sponsor obtain from the investigator prior to start of study? Signed investigator statement. Codes Phase 1, Clinical Protocol. Phase 2/3, Protocol outline with approximate number of subjects to get treatment and number to be used as controls. Financial disclosure. Equity interest in publicly traded company greater than $, should be reported, $50,000. How long is the reporting period for equity interest and significant payments? Study period plus 1 year.